Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Games from Almost in Full Color. Today's video, I want to talk about Stadia and where it currently is right now. I know we've all heard about it being white labeled to where Google has decided more so to use it as a infrastructure service for maybe other gaming developers and things like that to utilize the actual technology of Stadia and utilize the infrastructure as a cloud gaming service, other than them being like a Sony or a Xbox or a Nintendo, to where not only are they providing the service, but they're also providing the games and trying to be like a first party gaming developer as well. So let's get into it. Now, just to be honest, I have been a Stadia Pro member and currently still am since it launched back in November 2019. Also purchased the Founders Edition back in like June of 2019. So I've been playing Stadia since it's launched and currently still use it now, albeit not as much right now, but I do still use it, claim the games every month, and I always try out the games that they give us for Stadia Pro. But the majority of this time, I always seen Stadia at some point transitioning into this role, just because I never really seen Google as having a actual shot in order to break through the ice that is currently the gaming ecosystem right now. Like, gaming has been just solidified between the three main families, which is Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. When it comes to consoles, anyway, we're not discussing PCs right now, but as a console based gaming market, it's really difficult to kind of break into that. Not only do you have basically you're talking super big companies that have been doing gaming for a long time, but you also have the loyalties built up from the players in that player base, where maybe Nintendo is not as bad with it, but we all know how it is when it comes to Xbox versus Sony or Xbox versus PlayStation. Like, it gets pretty toxic. You can see it online. You can probably see it amongst friends. The fanboyism is real. So being able to crack through that as a completely new gaming developer, which Google would be, bringing in a completely new way to game that is drastically different than what was on the market at the time, being the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, it's going to be very hard to get people to come over. So we need to make sure that we think back to the time of when Google Stadia was kind of a little more in the news than what it is now. Yes, at that time, I would say Stadia was better performance wise than the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, just basing it on games like Destiny 2. You got to play in 4K, but you also got the 60 FPS, whereas the 60 FPS was something that the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X just wasn't able to do at the time, or they just weren't doing. Either way, you didn't get the 60 there. But that really wasn't a big enough leap forward to like have people come over. It was enough to make people maybe try it. People like myself who, just love technology and kind of wanted to see what it had to offer. Most people ended up going back to where they came from, though, just because 60 FPS and of course not having to wait for downloads and installs. It's very convenient for the downloads and installs, like to be able to skip that stuff, but it's just not enough to really break that hold that those other gaming companies have on the player base. And then probably the number one thing that you have to deal with is player retention, because back then there was really no crossplay. If it was on any games, it was in its infancy. It's not as well known and well implemented as it is now. So you would get someone to come over and play Stadia, like myself. I come over, play Stadia on Destiny 2, and I love it. I'm like, wow, I can't go back to the PS4 Pro. But the problem is all of my friends on the PS4 Pro. So now I've completely isolated myself from the player base that I used to interact with all the time. And you end up either playing more solo, which I kind of did because I really enjoyed the 60 FPS, but it did tarnish my gaming experience with it, just because I'm used to playing with those individuals. And now it's like, you're either picking Stadia or you're picking your friends. And that's always usually going to be a losing battle. So it's going to be hard to keep those players over on Stadia. They usually just end up migrating back to the console that they used to play on. Also, timing was bad. Stadia came out, yeah, it was the better option at the time, but everyone knew the PS5 and the Xbox Series X was right around the corner. Like, we knew the next generation was right on the horizon, and when it came, it was either going to match Stadia or it was going to best it. And we know by now that those consoles have definitely bested where Stadia is, and it doesn't look like Google's going to be doing any infrastructure updates to kind of either catch up or maybe even try to get a slight leg up on those consoles, like Nvidia GeForce Now has with their 3080 tier. I would say that the 3080 subscription on GeForce Now is a slight step above the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. Stadia has not gone that route, so right now it's behind once again. So you're not going to get people to come over and play on a lesser tier of hardware. If those players don't have PS5 or Xbox Series X, they probably have the last generation and they're just waiting until they can get one. They're not going to come over. And another point that I think a lot of people like really don't take into consideration is how hard it is to sell a service or a product to someone where you can't guarantee the performance. And that was really one of Google's biggest hurdles that I think nobody ever really spoke about, like how hard that is when you don't have consistency. That's one thing that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo always have. When Nintendo sells you a Switch, whether they sell that Switch to me or to a million people, that Switch is going to perform unless obviously there's some hardware defect inside of that produced model. But it's going to perform the exact same way for me that it does for a million other people, because it's a hardware based gaming platform. All the processors, everything is right there, so it's local. Same thing with the PlayStation, same thing with the Xbox. No matter how many they sell, we'll all get the same experience. Now, whether we enjoy that experience or not, that's completely up to us. But the consoles will always perform the exact same. That's something that Stadia never had for it, just because Stadia has so many variables involved with it. Like, everyone's setup is different. What laptop you're playing on, maybe what firewalls you have set up, maybe what internet provider you have, maybe what router you have, maybe where your device is located in your home, your internet connection speed, your internet connection strength, your location from a data center that's running Google Stadia. There's so many variables involved with Stadia that I can have, which I did, an amazing experience with Stadia. But then I could have like a buddy of mine, like for instance, Roger, when he was first playing Destiny 2, it was running at like 10 frames per second. Like, for whatever reason, he was stuck on like some crazy server blade in the Google Stadia cloud that just made it run horrible. We both were paying for the exact same service, but had extremely different results. And you can always see this when you go online, when you go on forums, that people say, oh, mine has a jitter here, or mine has, so many artifacts in the graphics, the picture looks blurry, or this happens or that happens. And it's like, yeah, because all of our setups are so different, it's hard for Google to provide a consistent quality product to everyone, because they're all dependent on what we have on our end. It's very dependent on our hardware when it comes to internet, when it comes to internet speeds, when it comes to what controller are you using. Are you doing, Bluetooth on a PlayStation or Xbox controller? Oh, well, maybe you should hardwire it in. Are you running on Wi-Fi? Oh, you're doing 5G? Well, you should really hardwire that in. Do you have your firewalls open? Did you forward these ports, for Google Stadia? That'll help it move packets better. It's so many variables that it really can get difficult to make sure everyone has a pleasant experience, or everyone has the same opportunity to have a pleasant experience. And lastly, I would say that the major hurdle that Google never really addressed was, what happens if they did close the door? What happens if they did turn the lights out? How would you play those games? Now, obviously, the games that we've got from being Stadia Pro members, I don't expect access to those. I don't believe anyone does. No different than if PlayStation Plus or Xbox Gold went down. All the games that we claim for free, I don't think anyone actually expects to continually play those, even though they would still have an Xbox or still have a PlayStation. I mean, come on, we kind of understand that that's subscription tied to stuff. But for games that we actually purchased, outright on Stadia, those games, what happens to them? And Google always kind of kicked that can down the road and said, well, we have something for that. We have something for that, but they never spoke to what that was. Now, all other cloud gaming services right now, besides Luna, have an answer for that. Now, that doesn't mean the answer is great, but there is an answer. When it comes to Microsoft, obviously, they still have Xbox. You can just play those games on Xbox. PlayStation Now service is crap, but hey, you have a PlayStation, you can just play it on PlayStation. GeForce Now, hey, all your games are on Steam. So if GeForce Now went down, never to come back again, go buy you a gaming rig and you can play all those games you purchased. Now, that's not the greatest of options because obviously you're going to pay probably, I don't know, maybe a couple grand to get a good gaming rig, maybe more now with these prices. But it is an option. They at least give you a way out of the house that's burning down. Whereas Google is like, hey, we're going to free you. But you look outside and there's no fire trucks. It's like, yeah, I don't have much hope for that. So with those points I've been making, I feel like they never really had a chance to succeed as a game provider, as a game developer, or an actual gaming service. But what they did have was amazing cloud-based technology for gaming. To be able to provide 4K gaming at 60 FPS is crazy. No other service outside of GeForce Now has been able to do that. So I've always kind of seen them transitioning more into this infrastructure as a service model, to where maybe companies like a Sega, these type of companies, maybe Capcom, Konami, these developers might say, hey, we kind of want to get a game out there, but maybe we don't want to make hardware anymore. Maybe we could just kind of ramp up some servers in your infrastructure, take advantage of that, and we can get these games out to people who have phones. So now we're not making mobile games, we're making actual games that you can play on your phone, but utilize the power of Google Stadia. Now you can actually play these games on your TVs. You've seen Google Stadia is now having little deals with the Peloton bikes. There's a lot of ways to get games into the hands of consumers, but now you don't have to build out a cloud gaming infrastructure. There's already one there waiting for you to use in Google Stadia. So now you get the technology from Google, which they seem to always be great at, but they suck at marketing. So you have the technology of the infrastructure of Stadia, and you have the gaming expertise and the development expertise for gaming from companies like I mentioned, like Stadia, Capcom, Konami, all of these people who want to use that type of infrastructure. Even companies like Sony could benefit from it. PlayStation Now is horrible. So instead of investing all this money trying to figure out how to fix PlayStation Now, you can just utilize what Google already has. They already have a working cloud-based gaming infrastructure. Use that. People kind of forget how much money is involved in R&D of trying to figure out how you're going to create an entire new infrastructure to promote PlayStation Now. I know Microsoft is doing their updates and things. They updated all their blades to the Xbox Series X blades. Anyone who plays xCloud knows that it's still not good. It's better than PlayStation Now, but it's not good. It's not really a viable service yet, although it is in the beta. So, I guess you got to take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, kind of to wrap this up, I know it's kind of droned on for a little bit, but sadly, this is where I always seen Stadia being. I don't see Stadia as actually dying. I see the Stadia as a gaming service dying. That's going to die. They're not going to be making first party games for Stadia and all that type of stuff anymore. I feel like that part of Stadia, or that vision of Stadia, is going to die and is dying off now. But Stadia is transitioning into a new life, so to speak, as infrastructure as a service, allowing other people to take advantage of what they've built and make it better. Kind of like Android, it's on everything, on phones now. You got companies like Samsung, OnePlus, LG, all these big companies, Google themselves, they make a device using Android. They use that as the operating system, so to speak, and they just build a good thing using it. So I kind of see that's what Stadia is going to become, which could be good. It still could get AAA titles and big games into people's hands who don't have, higher end consoles, or don't have big time gaming rigs, or maybe people who just like to play games on the go. I feel like it could be a good transition to a lot of this cross play, cross save, cross account progression that we have going now, which is great. It's always good to be able to continue your games on multiple platforms. And with the introduction of 5G, you know, those speeds are nuts. You're definitely able to support cloud gaming over 5G. Using a technology like that for the future and just kind of bringing those things into the play, like that could definitely pay off in the long run for a lot of companies who sadly looks like we're going subscription based. It's probably going to look to utilize and leverage that type of technology. So that is where I see Stadia going in the future. And I don't know how viable it will be. I don't know if maybe, you know, it'll stick around like that, but I do believe that that's going to be the next phase for the next few years of Google Stadia. So I guess with that being said, that's going to wrap up the video. As always, thank you for the support. If you have anything you want to discuss, feel like maybe I overlooked something or maybe you don't agree with something, please put it down in the comments. More than happy to discuss it with you. As always, like I said, thanks for supporting the channel and catch you next time.